Hi, everyone. We will begin in just one moment. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, The Rescue and Recovery of a Failing Software Development Project. A little housekeeping before we begin. If at any point you have any questions about the content of this webinar or general support issues on displaying or hearing the presentation, please use the Q&A box on the left-hand side of your screen. Please also note that we will have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So do send in your questions and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. Our speakers today are Bert Sams from Haggai International and Ann Mooney from SOLTECH. Bert Sams is the VP of Technology at Haggai International. Bert manages the technology arm of Haggai International, which is a critical part of the business operations and team communication. Ann Mooney is our client success lead here at SOLTECH. Ann leads our software and staffing business development efforts and is responsible for the initiation and long-term success of our client engagements and partnerships. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ann.
Thanks, Jasmine. I appreciate it. And thanks, Bert, for joining us. I wanted to really start about the inspiration for this webinar. We at SOLTECH have helped a variety of companies when they've had some difficulties with their projects or they find a developer who doesn't have the skill sets. The project is running over the budget. There are a variety of reasons of why a project might fail. And we have created a product here called Rescue and Recovery where we're able to support clients with their needs and trying to get their project across the finish line. The main readings, obviously, stopping the bleeding. There is no really direct plan on how they can move forward. And there is no clear path to execute the project efficiently. And we have found that we've found a great process to enable clients to be successful. So I wanted to really say we're really excited, Bert, to have you here to be a part of this webinar to talk about rescue and recovery. Bert had firsthand experience with our project when we worked with Haggai International. Bert was involved in overseeing the project and was a driving force in engaging his global business teams, and that was critical to the success. Bert, give us a little bit of information about Haggai International and what you do there.
Certainly. Thank you, Ann. Haggai International is a global ministry that equips strategically positioned leaders around the world on how to more effectively demonstrate and present the gospel of Jesus Christ. We do this through an extensive education process that requires us to follow significant workflows to select, evaluate, nominate, and then logistically support the attendance of these leaders at our global training events. We've been using a very complex yet outdated legacy custom software solution that we needed to replace entirely in order to improve and automate these processes that are required for our leader training.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Bert, one of the things, knowing that when you had these decisions and we were having these issues, were, why did you choose SOLTECH for your rescue and recovery? Obviously, we've been in the business for over 20 years. We have tried and true processes. Did you have previous experience with SOLTECH? having access to our team and any of our past references. So if you could give us a little bit more details of why you chose SOLTECH.
Definitely, yes. Well, we had a plan that we'd put together to replace this old system with a new web application that would include lots of enhancements and functions, processing and automation. And a smaller developer was contracted to do the work, but after 3 years of limited progress, we decided that this project was just beyond their skill base. So when I came on, when I came onto the organization, we began looking for a more advanced software developer. And after reviewing the marketplace, gathering references, and so forth, we began an initial engagement with SOLTECH. In addition to these comparisons and references, as I just talked about, however, the two things that stood out most to us about SOLTECH is their breadth of large and small companies that they service, as well as their breadth of staffing skill set. We need a business analyst, a project manager, front-end developer, back-end developer, database designer, all these skill sets to contribute to this solution. A small developer with 2, 3, 4 people in their shop just can't do all these functions effectively. And we learned this, unfortunately, the hard way with this previous development group.
Right. Now, I remember when you told us about your developer having a difficult time having all the skill sets that you needed in order to be successful. So one of the things that you also mentioned was really, why did you need to be rescued, right? And some of the things that you talked about was you had outdated code that couldn't be supported by any modern development team. There really wasn't a plan. You had overreached your budget and hardly had any features developed at that time. And like you mentioned, some lack of skill sets. So talk to me a little bit more about, the need of going into details about why you thought you might needed support from SOLTECH.
Definitely. Our existing system that I referenced earlier was 12 years old. It was no longer supported because it was written in an old programming language. All the new developers in the marketplace don't pursue knowledge of that programming language, and so we couldn't find anybody to support it. We didn't have the internal staff to do it for sure. So that was one of the key variables here. The system was unreliable, it was very slow, and it didn't support a lot of the newer processes that we were now doing manually, and so that just missed a lot of automation opportunities in this old system. The replacement system that was under development for multiple years was not achieving our required state in terms of progress, and the contract developers that we worked with just couldn't bring it to closure. Deadlines were being missed, budget had been exceeded, this project had just kind of lost control in some ways, that we just had to step back and decide it's time to look for a company that can help kind of bail us out and get us back on track with this application, and that's what led us ultimately to SOLTECH.
Right. So, now we know the why, why you needed it, but now really, how is this really impacting you and your fellow employees and your global leaders? Was it affecting user experience? Obviously, you just mentioned there was some financial loss, data and quality of, the quality of your data. You had some server issues, little accuracy, and you really didn't have redundant servers. You had a server that was a physical presence based down in Florida. So talk to me a little bit about how this was really affecting your team at Haggai International.
Sure. We had lots of issues with this older application. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it was 12 years old. It was just not current technology. There were processes that we would try to execute on the web application that may take 15 minutes to bring up the data that we're requesting, or the next slide or the next screen, I should say, on the data entry. Likewise, reports would take a long time, and some reports would just never run. When the developer originally developed this application, the reports, for whatever reason, never operated. We had also designed new processes to streamline operations for this, and the new system didn't incorporate any of that. Likewise, some of the processes that this old system did incorporate were becoming outdated and no longer relevant for what we were doing. The database was poorly designed, including some of the data that existed in multiple tables, where you may go in and update particular fields that needed to be in the database, but that field or that data may be in multiple tables. And so as a result, we may get reports that weren't consistent because the database wasn't truly normalized properly. And then the application would lock up from time to time, and sometimes for no reason that we could understand. And so we'd have to go in and restart the application. And it wasn't uncommon for us to have to go through a full re-indexing of the database. All this would take a lot of time, and the system was unavailable during that recovery experience. So these just kind of outline the main issues that we ran into consistently with this old application.
One of the things I remember when I first met you, that one of your coworkers told me how she would start a report, leave to go get a cup of coffee, go to the restrooms, come back, and then hope that it was done. So
yeah.
Obviously that was an issue for your team.
Right. The performance was just very slow in that regard, and yeah.
That's awesome, yeah. So one of the things that was, we found out the why it was affecting you, and then when we came in, and SOLTECH came in to support you, there is a specific process that we go through every time, and I think that we do this for quite a bit of our other clients with rescue and recovery, and we did this with you as well, Bert. And I think it's one of the things I spoke about, that is our tried and true process when it comes to rescue and recovery. And it doesn't matter if it's a large project or a small project, but we go through the same steps. And the first step is truly a technical assessment or a transition. And that is clearly what it sounds like. We assess all the data that you have to go through, and then we transition the code. We try to compile it and stand it up and to see if it's working. Now, the next steps is an immediate, any kind of functional updates, things that we have to do to make sure that it's live, working in production for you. After that, we kind of work with you and the teams trying to figure out, is there a nice design or a planning session that we need to do? We figure out development structures and data models. We start development. We work with user experiences. And then after going through all those processes, we get to the phase where we are right now with you, Bert, really is the training and ongoing consulting, where we are doing ongoing projects, ongoing support work, and ongoing training with our clients. So this is a very typical process for our rescue and recovery. And we did this exactly with you, with Bert, with Haggai. So going on
yes,
to the three, yes. Go ahead, Bert.
Go ahead.
I apologize. So,
no, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, great. Yeah, so with Haggai, the three main projects that we worked with for you were really data organization, helping you with your user workflow, and then doing ongoing projects and training. And with that, I thought maybe there might be some ways that you can talk about these initiatives that we worked with you.
Yes, definitely. Sorry for interrupting earlier. But yeah, this is a good outline of the processes that we went through with you all to help us move forward. SOLTECH began working with us to review our process flows for the new application that we needed to get developed to replace the old one. But a lot of that work had initially failed because of the previous developer until SOLTECH came in and just had some very methodical processes that we would go through to define what the process flows are and how it needs to look inside an application. And so there was some redesign and reprogramming since the original application that was under development didn't get finished. And so SOLTECH came in, and after we doing process flow design, there was some reprogramming of this application to get it up and running as part of the phase one of the bigger project. This included moving application from one facility located in Florida, which was in Hurricane Alley. And so we moved the legacy application into Microsoft Azure in the cloud, which gave us a lot more of a stable, reliable platform, which was a great benefit. This relocation greatly improved the performance and reliability of the application as well. Data and database cleanup of the old application were necessary in order for us to prepare for phase two, which was the final set of development work for this overall project to replace the old application.
Right. So I kind of want to talk about each one of these individually. So in the first initiative, obviously, was what you just spoke about was the data. There was mismatched data that you talked about, quality. You talked about volumes of databases in there. And then you just kind of briefly mentioned the setting up of the cloud-based server with Azure instead of being on-premise. So talk to me a little bit about this in a little more detail for you, will you, Bert?
Right. So the old application, in particular, the data integrity was not clean at all. Furthermore, anyone could, who had login rights, could go in and edit data in fields that they didn't really have the authority to make changes in. The manual process around it caused some inconsistencies in terms of how to use the application, the old application, properly. And we had pretty strong data volume. We had hundreds of tables in our database, tens of thousands of records that needed to be cleaned up and formatted. There was some data that was completely irrelevant and no longer in use, and there was tables that had been designed but completely empty and had never been used to collect data or track data. And as I mentioned earlier, we had to kind of normalize the database so that data didn't exist in multiple tables. And so that process was part of the initial engagement with SOLTECH to get that data in the original application cleaned up so that we could migrate it into the new application that SOLTECH developed for us. And after 4 years of that piece of work going on, we do finally have a clean database in our new application. So we're very pleased with that process.
Right.
And this all affects our leaders, yes.
You had mentioned that you wanted to shrink your digital footprint and really do a true technical consolidation during this process.
Yes, indeed, for sure.
So that's kind of the initiative. So next is really kind of what are some best practices when you go through this? You mentioned some of the activities we did. Obviously, we did data maps, automating scripts, developed a plan going to Azure. We talked about doing any kind of reporting structure and obviously some side-by-side testing. One of the key best practices that I know that we worked on for you was really kind of when we transitioned to Azure, and one of that was the process of crystal reporting and updating that to the SQL Server reporting structure that you did. And talk to me about some of that steps that we took to help you in that process.
Right. So again, this old application used crystal reports to develop the reports that could be generated for the users that were using the application, and those reports were static. You couldn't go in, well, effectively, you couldn't go in and edit them. And so as we migrated this application from its old platform to Azure, we discovered some issues and inconsistencies with crystal reporting, and so SOLTECH had to come in and help clean that up and have the reports properly operating in the Azure environment. Along the way, that also included cleaning up a lot of the data. So the tables got fully reviewed and cleaned up so that the reports could work and generate properly. Had to determine which ones of these reports were relevant to this new business plan, as well as other reports that needed to be added in the future with this new application that SOLTECH was working with us on. And also an important part of this transition was the old application was running on a very old version of SQL Server, and as part of the migration to the Azure platform, we had to upgrade to the newer version, and that was a little bit of a struggle. But with SOLTECH's skill set, their staff involved in it, the transition was a whole lot more seamless than certainly we could have ever been able to accomplish on our own. So that was a real big win.
One of the things that you told me were there were reports that at one point had never worked, and as soon as we did this migration for you, they started working, and not just working, but working instantly.
Yes, that was really a great win also, because some reports no one ever expected to work, but when we put them on the Azure platform with its higher performance and efficiencies that came with that, some reports began running in seconds, and other reports that would run but may take literally 10 or 15 minutes to generate, now we're also working in seconds. And so that was a great benefit by moving this to this new platform with the old application. So really good, yes.
That's great. So here's just obviously just a little overview of what we just kind of talked about, going from, Hurricane Alley on-premise, going now into the Microsoft Azure Cloud Services with your SQL Server database, kind of updating, working some with our team and design. But what I think is really interesting is because we made those changes for you, you were able to utilize some of the features with Azure and also with some other third-party, specifically Salesforce platforms, due to your nonprofit status. So talk to me a little bit about that, of how that was really important to you.
Yeah, that really worked out well for us. As you may know, as some people may know, Microsoft has a great relationship and program for nonprofits, and we had become a partner with Microsoft as a nonprofit, and so a lot of their software or services or platforms like Azure are available to us at substantially reduced cost. And for us to move this application to Azure allowed us to remove it from the old location that it was in Florida, and the cost practically went away because we have to a degree, some free services with Azure that we would be paying for if we were on the older physical platform in Florida. So there was a great savings there for us in terms of dollars, but also, of course, in terms of performance and reliability of this platform in the cloud. And then when we continued with phase 2 of this application development project, you all had determined that Salesforce is an ideal platform for us to develop the rest of this application on. Salesforce, likewise, is a real good partner with nonprofits, and so we as well got tremendous discounts from Salesforce on their product because of our nonprofit status. And so it was a real win in a lot of ways, not just in terms of getting a good application up and running and on a reliable platform, but also by having it on 2 platforms that are 2 technologies that we as a nonprofit get tremendous discounts and pricing benefits from. So it was a really, really good plan for us.
Great. I know you had told me that being on these platforms now has enabled you to scale, which is super helpful for you.
Yep, very good point, because we've got a lot of opportunity to grow both these technologies with Microsoft and Salesforce, and give us great growth opportunity, as well as turning up more resources as databases get larger and performance needs to be improved. So real scalability that we have to grow into the future with these, definitely.
Definitely. Well, after we got through that first initiative, which was the data organization, we really kind of had to focus really on your user workflow. You had issues with passwords. There really weren't any passwords. They weren't encrypted. You had security roles that were mismatched. People could kind of make any changes within your application. Obviously, that goes into roles and permissions. The user face was a little outdated, and there was a lot of actions that need to be taken from each user. So, Bert, talk to me a little bit about some of that and how that was and what we kind of did for you for that.
Right. Well, you're correct. We had several opportunities that we needed to address in working with you all to fully understand the workflow to help build this software effectively. And like you said, we had password issues because passwords were not encrypted. They weren't properly maintained, and people would log in with their credentials and have access to data and editing that they shouldn't have access to. Likewise, users might need access to things, but they don't have access to it. And so it was just poorly designed in that regard in terms of enabling the user to have access and visibility to the screens and data entry and fields that they needed to effectively do their job. And likewise, some of the functions were never fully developed in the old system. And so with this user workflow phase of this project, we were able to identify those and incorporate those in the design of this new application. So really helpful in that regard. Likewise, just designing a user interface is compelling and appealing to our users so that they can use it efficiently and effectively.
Right. So, those were the issues. And then there's kind of some specifics that SOLTECH kind of did with you for this. And obviously, we spoke with your users. We determined a plan. We figured out how to do the encryptions with your passwords and a variety of other things. So, but to me, one of the things is we've got some really, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I really want to kind of show what the original application looked like. And Bert, if you can walk me through this. This is your, I want to say, web application before we touched it. And if you could talk to me about how things were, the menu on the left, and how your clients had to work through it, and how your team members and whatnot. If you can give specifics on how this was kind of a challenge for you.
Definitely. Well, as you can see from this particular screenshot here, and this is indicative or reflective of most of the screens on our old application, is very non-graphical. The only thing graphical about it was they had color, but otherwise it was very unappealing and not very efficient in terms of how it designed or delivered screens for either data presentation or data collection. So naturally, a very outdated user interface here. You see the vertical panel on the left there indicates different functions or screens that people could click on to go to. Many of those links or menu options had other submenus, and so there were times when the user would have to make multiple clicks to get to a different screen. But maybe they go to screen 1, and then they have to go through another click to get to screen 2, and it's three levels deep, and then they've got to go back to screen 1, and before they know it, they've had to work through multiple screens in a very inefficient process to get to the data that they need to through these different views. And so it just introduced a lot of inefficiencies because of the number of screens that people would need to get to all the data that they needed to either edit or update or review for the work that was represented by these processes. And so likewise, these screens took a lot of time to load up. They may click on a link, and it may be minutes before the screen presents itself with the data or the information that they need to view. So just some performance issues as well with this older design that was developed in our original application.
You had told me one time that the average click to find anything was somewhere between 10 to 15 times, and they also had to actually even go to other applications all in itself and then manipulate the data and bring it into here to get what they really wanted.
Yes, that's correct. A lot of data exporting and importing, or just slow movement of getting the data that they needed from this one application.
Right. So, and then after doing a little bit of work on your user flow, we were able to create kind of a single view of everything and in a little more modern view. So talk to me a little bit how the new updated application has really helped with you and your leaders.
Yes, so this is a good screenshot or a good screen image of the common layout of our new web application that SOLTECH developed for us in the Salesforce platform. So what we're looking at here is a screen of Salesforce with our custom application in it. And rather than having to go look for contact information across multiple different screens in the old form with the old application, here we've got this one test contact we call Bruce Wayne. And so from here we've got all the access and links that we need to see. As you see the different tabs, you can see that we could go to session applications related to this contact, the session nominations. These are all related to the classes that a contact would attend. Payment information, and if you clicked on more, it would pull down other menu options or tabs that they could just click on without ever leaving this screen. So you could just kind of navigate and move around dozens and dozens of fields of data all in this one screen, which is very efficient. Likewise, this platform with Salesforce gave us this action block in the right side where we could send emails out to others within the organization or emails back out to Bruce Wayne or to whoever the contacts were. There's a tab next to that for new tasks, and we could track tasks and assign tasks that were related to this particular contact from right within the application. And then we could go back and track the progress of these tasks if they were assigned to anybody. And so this was an added benefit or added function of this to allow us to more effectively and efficiently do processes that we needed to from this action block that we have here. So just a really good layout, and you see a lot more graphically oriented too, that made it a much easier application for the users to get around into to get the data that they needed.
And I'm sure your global users found this to be a lot more simplistic and easy for them to use. And I know that you asked your teammates to test it and make sure that it worked efficiently. So I know that it was very helpful for you and your team to make sure that it was all easy for them to find all the information all on one screen for you.
Yes, correct, definitely.
So now that we did the user workflow, was figuring out the next ongoing projects and training for you. And we did a lot of talking with you because at first you did not have a technical roadmap. You obviously did not do any kind of testing. There was a huge activity of after-hour deployment due to your global span and all your people that work in all different parts of the world. And that created a real difficulty in training and making sure that everyone understood what was being accomplished all at the same time, and also understand that because of having such a global outreach. We still had to constantly make sure of performance concerns also because of the global outreach, and what was going to be your ongoing post-live support. So Bert, talk to me a little bit about, with your team and getting this on track for you guys.
Yes, certainly. So at the beginning of this project, we had to get the whole team together and on board, the project team, and it consisted of 5 subject matter experts representing the user community that they serviced or managed, including myself as the IT project leader. And so this is our project team, and virtually all of these, except for myself, were in different parts of the country or in different parts of the world. We had 4 different time zones represented by the members of this project team, and that introduced some opportunities for us to schedule our times, our meetings, our test implementations, and so forth, based on variable time zones. And so that had some opportunities that came with that. Likewise, as part of this project, we had to understand the global team needs in order to provide a clear plan and next steps. I was certainly not in a position to assume or conclude what the needs were going to be for the different users spread across the world and their different cultures that they need and support. And so a lot of meetings, of course, with SOLTECH and us together, talking about the definition of processes and how to apply that to the application, and then working on some after-hours testing, because we still had the live application running, and then we'd put the test application in and then let the users test it and use it, and then go back and do some more work. But then going live with it ultimately was an effort that we had to do after hours, because the hours that we're working here on the East Coast, most of the users are in bed because there's as much as a 10-hour or longer time difference between some of the time zones. And as a result of that, the work that we had to do to implement this application required us to do some after-hours work. And then once it went live, there was ongoing post-live support that SOLTECH did a great job providing to address enhancements, do some tuning, and then just identify what the next steps and next projects would be associated with this application. So we've got an ongoing series of projects and enhancements that we have that SOLTECH is guiding us through as part of this ongoing project.
All right. So, when we were going through all of this, there were some specific steps, obviously, that SOLTECH supported you in with this. Obviously, there was, when you spoke about the plan and the go live, the technical plan, the go live plan, the testing plan, the deployment plan. Talk to me a little bit about what SOLTECH did, at least from understanding from a perspective of how we went through all these best practices with you.
Yes, just kind of touch on some key bullet points here. You all had a chief architect, a solution architect come in and work with us and our project team with Haggai International to stabilize and get the process to complete our Haggai Connect application. And so there was cleanup and adjustment that needed to be made, but also architecting the new replacement application once and for all. We flew our team members that were spread across the world, the globe, into our Atlanta office for several days to meet with the solution architect and some others from SOLTECH to talk about and define what the project needs were, have workflow discussions and so forth. The management team knew what they needed to accomplish, but just didn't understand the technology that was needed, and so these conversations helped with that. Likewise, the commitment of time and money and the skill set to do it were unclear. And so with the specialists from SOLTECH coming in, that helped us to understand more of what this is and give us a great deal of confidence that you all had the resources to do this. But again, because of the time zone differences, there were times when SOLTECH would have to get up at different times. We'd all have to get up here in Atlanta at a different time and meet because it was a different time zone that some of the members of the team were in, and so this had to be adjusted to accommodate everybody's time zone availability.
I remember when you flew in your senior leaders from all over the world and our solution architect, and we met with them, and it was really great way for our company to really understand and learn your business, because for our architects, that's key. It's key for them to understand what are their needs and what are their interests and how can we technically make that happen. And that's really where we were able to create the technical roadmap, which, you know, we're still working off today. We started this 4 years ago. We're now in other projects today. So I think it's really great that we were able to do that. So
yes,
kind of really now we're kind of at
well.
well, and that kind of gets to how did this impact you and where are we today on all of this? You know, obviously, you know, you wanted a stable partner and we were able to work with you. You were able to get a scalable solution through all of this. We've improved your efficiencies. We've improved your performance. But I would like to really talk and ask you really, I mean, how did this impact your growth in your business, the access to your alumni, to your leaders, and how they were able to go through their processes both internally and externally. So talk to me how that's really kind of impacted you.
Sure. Well, the platforms that we implemented were tremendously scalable, as we mentioned before, and that was just a really huge win because it gives us capacity for now, but also gives us capacity to grow and to expand and enhance this application in the future. And again, these are widely supported platforms that are known in the marketplace. They're very robust. And we're already looking at ways to grow and scale up within our organization because these platforms can support that. The value add provided as a nonprofit has been big, and you all helped us to leverage that. We would not have been able to afford Salesforce as a nonprofit, but you all enabled and arranged for that relationship to be established so that we could get nonprofit pricing and support from Salesforce. Increased efficiency by our internal users of the system. They're just greatly impressed with the improvements in terms of processes and speed of application running and that kind of thing. And then the data being consolidated and cleaned up in such a way that it's easy to use and to access and to trust because the data is clean in a well-designed database. And Salesforce being utilized as one of our primary platforms with this, we'll continue to use Salesforce in other areas of the ministry because of this broad platform base and the other modules that can be added in from Salesforce that can help augment these applications that we'll be developing on. And so these are just some samples or examples of how the impact of us getting this application in place using Salesforce and Microsoft technologies.
Right. One of the things that I really think is great is we're now working with you on ongoing support tickets. We're working with you setting up in the future some more dedicated support. We're going to be working on another project with your national ministries. So there's like this ongoing relationship that I truly found that we became a really nice technical partner to support you. What I also thought was very interesting is we utilize the Salesforce platforms, but then you talk about the Microsoft technologies and how we were able to create more of a custom solution over it so you could manage your user base that touched Salesforce. And I thought that was really key for you as well.
Yes, both
so
of these
Bert,
technology platforms are, yeah,
go ahead,
these platforms have been really good for us, so thank you, yes.
Yeah, Bert, I really appreciate it. We have truly enjoyed working with you for the past 4 years. As I like to say, you were my very first sell here at SOLTECH 4 years ago, and I'm happy to be doing an ongoing support webinar, Rescue and Recovery, with you right now, and to know what a great partnership we have.
Yes, definitely a real successful partnership, and we're glad to have it and look forward to the future of working with you all.
That's great. So I'm going to go on into some Q&A. Jasmine, if you can help us to see if there's any Q&A that we might be able to help answer these questions for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a few questions that came in. The first question is, once you go live, what are the support programs available to clients?
That's a really good question. And I kind of briefly mentioned them of what we're doing with BERT, but we have a variety of options. We have a dedicated support plan. We have what we call part-time support, which is 20 hours a week, and then we do an ad hoc. We do not require a retainer for any of these. We do like to have some kind of contractual arrangement, but we do not require any kind of 6-month retainer. Bert, we have worked on an ad hoc, I want to call it a list-based solution with you for the past few years that kind of went into small mini projects along the way. And I'm happy to say that we're kind of now to the point where we can do a part-time dedicated, but those are the levels of the support plans that we have today. But we try to be nimble with our clients and find the right one that works for them.
Great. We do have another question. It's related to support as well. It's, do you require a retainer to get support work done?
No, we do not. So we do ask that there is either a few hours, we allow at least 4 hours to look at it and fix it, and then after that we ask for approvals. We do not require a 6-month upfront fee. We try to be nimble and flexible with our clients to determine the best solution for support for them.
Great. We do have time for a final question. So how much technical or design experience do I need to develop an application?
That's a really good question. The way we work at it here is we have solution architects that work in our rescue and recovery and also our other projects. And you can be as technical as you need to be. So Bert, obviously, being the VP of IT, had a little bit more technical experience. So our architects were able to speak with him in a little bit more technical terms. But we deal with quite a few companies where we're dealing with product or dealing with business development or someone who wants to create an application but does not know technology, and that's why they come to us. So you really do not need to have the experience because that is what our solution architects will help do for you. And then Bert had mentioned how we have business analysts, application architects, and all different types of development skill sets. That's really why SOLTECH is here for you, is to help you with the heavy lifting and to be your technical partner. So we can help someone with quite a bit of technical experience or not any at all. So we're here to help anyone be successful.
Excellent. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Bert, once more for joining us on this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Yes, had a great experience here today. Glad to do it.
And then
any additional questions or would like to schedule a free consultation, please contact and connect with Ann Mooney. Also, if you arrived late or missed portions of the webinar, we will be sending out a recording in a few days, so you can listen to it again on demand. So thank you all again for joining, and have a wonderful day.